Hello, welcome to Self Talk. I'm Dr. Ray Self, your host. What is this show about? It's about getting free. Getting free from what, you may ask? It's getting free from anything that keeps you away from God's plan for your life, anything that hurts you or suppresses you or causes you harm. That's my heart. That's my passion. I want to see you free. I want to see you living your God-given dream. I want to see you being the person God created you to be. Stay tuned for our next exciting topic. Thank you for joining us today. God bless you. Hello, and welcome to Self Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Self. This episode is called Depression, Silent Despair. I have some very special guests, which I will introduce to you in just a moment. So, I want to just share a little bit about depression. You know, it's a holiday season. This is a really critical time. The suicide rates are up. I have no idea. It should be the season of joy. It should be the season of peace. But depression is rampant during this time of the year. I have a heart for this. I suffered depression for many years. I know it's kind of hard to believe, but I was depressed almost every day of my life from the time I was 16 till I was about 42 or 43 years old. I was depressed. I learned how to cope with it. I learned how to function with it. I could be smiling on the outside and miserable on the inside. You wouldn't know it. I worked in business. I worked in sales and marketing, and eventually in ministry, and still I was just a walking depressed person. It was all underneath the surface. Sometimes it wasn't. But to me, the Lord did set me free. It took a long time, but He did set me free. And I've learned a lot about it, and I have a heart for it. Depression is deadly. It's deadly, and it is a disease, and it's a curable disease. And I want to emphasize that it's a disease and it's a curable disease. And the reason that's important to me is, as a Christian, I did what a lot of people do. I was very hard on myself for being depressed. I would get upset with myself because I wasn't functioning the way I should function. And, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And I had no joy. And I was supposed to be doing this and doing that, but I didn't want to do this. I didn't feel like doing this. So my self-condemnation would feed the depression. And that's typical of people who are depressed. Depression, for me, it was like I put on a special pair of sunglasses. And these glasses colored the world in extremely negative light. Small problems became huge. Molehills became mountains. That was continual. The feeling of being overwhelmed, the feeling of having no motivation. Depression for me was like the temperature outside. It just sometimes it was mild, sometimes it was extreme. And it's very worst place. The worst place you can be in depression, I've been there, is a place I call the black hole. And the black hole is when you get to this place where there's no hope, no joy, no life, nothing to look forward to, nothing to live for. It's absolutely total despair. You're not just feeling bad, you're feeling nothing. No joy, no peace. And this is the point where many people will kill themselves thinking, well, it'd be better to be dead than to be in this place that I'm at. And then you can come out of the black hole and you get to where you just have a sadness that you function with. But the problem with depression, today we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the church. We're going to talk about answers. But the problem with depression, and this is what I want to emphasize to you, if you're suffering with depression, number one, it's a disease and it's curable. Quit being hard on yourself. One day my sister said something to me which changed my life. She said, Ray, if you had the flu and you didn't feel like going to work, would you be hard on yourself? I said, no, because I had the flu. She said, well, why are you so hard on yourself when you're depressed? I said, you're sick. You're sick. Take it easy on yourself. And that actually really helped me. But one of the key problems with depression, which people who are trying to help the depressed don't understand, is depression destroys motivation. It destroys your self-will. My mother used to say, son, depression is a disease of the will. You know the things you need to do, but you have no motivation, no desire, no drive to do them. That's why it's so difficult helping people who are depressed. Well, you need counseling. Just getting the energy to pick up the phone and make an appointment with a counselor can be huge. And then if you have the appointment, getting in the car and driving to it may be completely overwhelming. So one thing I emphasize, depressed people need other people to motivate them. They need people to encourage them and motivate them and help them. I know depression took away my life. It took away my joy. It affected my relationships. It affected my relationships with my children, with my wife. It affected my job performance. It caused me to get in a lot of condemnation. And then on top of it all, my church was absolutely clueless on how to handle it. And I'm not condemning the church. You know, Christ so loved the church that he gave his life for the church. But I would like to see the church address the issue in a more healthy, practical way. With all that being said, I have some very special guests. Let me introduce my guest to you today. I have in the studio with me Mr. Nelson Alsop. Nelson is a pastor. He's an author. He is a Christian counselor of 47 years of Christian counseling. He's also has a worldwide teaching ministry. It's a great honor to have you. Welcome, Nelson. Very glad to have you with us, and I want to ask you a few questions here in just a moment. Also have in the studio Pastor Bob Levins. Pastor Bob has over 39 years of ministry experience. He's been a pastor for 20 years. One of the best Bible teachers I've ever met in my life. I've actually sat under his teaching. And he's also an evangelist with a worldwide impact, worldwide ministry. In other words, we have some pros. Another thing that Bob did, which really impressed me, was he used to hold seminars at his church on depression to really help people. And has some great ideas on how to help people. So to get the discussion started, first, Nelson, I just want to ask you just a basic question. So the problem is serious. It's deadly.
Yes.
It's deadly. What do we do? What can we do?
Well, approaching the Christmas season when depression rates are high because people spend time with their families, and some of the members of the family they'd rather not be with. It's a problem to be with family. So there are some things that people can do to avoid being in that trap again. Number one, if you're traveling to see family and it's in a different city or a different state, don't fly there without renting a car. Don't let yourself be boxed in by somebody else's agenda. If you don't have an agenda, they will have an agenda for you. And it's difficult to escape unless you have transportation.
So you should have an escape plan.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So you may announce, well, I'm going to excuse myself. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Oh, well, where are you going? Well, I'm got to visit some friends. Well, we'll go with you. No, I'm sorry, but I'll be back in a couple of hours. Don't let them trap you. You take your escape and make it stick.
I used to teach a lot about when you're dealing with dysfunctional situations, which can be depressing. You have to make plans on how to limit your exposure. I can
That's
take
good.
I can take anything for a short period of time. Okay, but when it goes too long, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So to me, you may have to have an escape plan. You're saying to limit your exposure to the family, which is actually triggering more depression.
Right. And you may get some criticism for renting a car. We would have come picked you up at the airport. No, rent your car. Do whatever it takes to execute your escape plan. Another thing you can do is not pig out on comfort foods during the holidays.
Oh, wait a minute, you're crossing the line here.
I know it. I know it. But when you eat nutritiously,
Well,
feeding,
cookies are okay.
well, certain types of cookies. We're stepping on our own toes here.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're feeding nutritious things to your body, you're also feeding nutritious things to your brain. And you're going to eat some things that are good to eliminate depression. Any white compound carbohydrate is good, even though white potato may be a comfort food, but still there's popcorn, there is cauliflower. There are foods that you can eat that have serotonin in them, and that is the chemical that brings on bright feelings, positive feelings in our thinking.
I feel positive about key lime pie and chocolate cake. Well, you're saying that may not be a positive thing.
I was afraid you would say that, and the temptation is there. And if you must, take a small piece,
Yeah,
a sliver.
I agree. Yeah, yeah. Um, it's just, yeah, I want to just say this is such a sad show, but I won't go there. Bob, Pastor Bob, I know you have done seminars on this as a church, which is really interesting to me. It was done as a church, and I know you did it as a community outreach, as a church, and your church really worked at addressing a very serious problem. And again, I want to emphasize to this, what makes the problem so serious is that there are millions of people who are depressed are not talking to anybody about it. They're not, they're under the radar totally. So, in your opinion, how is the church handling this problem?
I started to realize, Ray, that I was not helping people enough. And I started to pray, Lord, we need to do more for these people. See, I have a couple of family members who really suffer from depression. And what I saw in the church, and I was the pastor, I saw the judgment. I saw the accusations, the cliches, the Christian cliches that these people were receiving. If you just trusted Jesus, you wouldn't be depressed, or come to the altar and we'll say a prayer of you and your depression will go away. And what I saw was that was increasing their guilt, their sense of, or their lack of, self-worth. So now what's wrong with me because people are praying for me and I'm not getting better? And they would hide their depression. And you'd mentioned that in your introduction. They would pretend that everything was fine. On the inside, they were dying. And I knew that because they would come to see me during the week. And I realized that smiling, happy person I saw on Sunday morning was not the person who was living Monday through Saturday with their depression. I think the church has been, if I could say, overwhelmingly inadequate in addressing this issue.
Amen.
The area of mental health is very, very important. We would never, hopefully, we wouldn't judge a diabetic who came to church and required insulin. We wouldn't require anybody with a different type of disease. But for some reason, when it comes to depression, people want to give short answers. Most of those people never suffered from depression. And they want to give them a quick answer to make themselves feel better. But the church as a whole has just not served people with this type of illness well at all.
Well, let me say this. I know for a typical pastor like me, when I was an active pastor, I would preach a sermon on Sunday, and I maybe do a Wednesday night Bible study. And I know on Sunday you knew there were a lot of issues going on in the church, depression and abuse and all kinds of stuff happening, divorce issues, and you really can't address it from the pulpit. There's only so much you can do from the pulpit. Right. So for the church, in order to address and minister to a problem like depression, it's going to be something different than Sunday morning. I mean, there's going to have to be some time spent, and this is not going to happen on Sunday between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m.
You can't address it. And, the first seminar I just did a very small amount of advertising to the local community. Jesus said it came to heal the brokenhearted. And I couldn't think of any more important outreach than reaching out to those who were suffering in this matter. And I did a couple commercials on the radio and had over 100 people come to the seminar. I was amazed at the outcome, and it started to impact me, the level of despair that people are feeling, and they had no hope. Most of them have gone to church their whole life. And I also family members came to the seminars that had loved ones who were depressed. The depressed people didn't come out, but the loved ones came out because they didn't know how to help them. So it really became a coordinated effort to put together a systematic approach. I think part of the answer to dealing with depression is control. Either you're going to control depression or it's going to control you. I can give you all the advice in the world. A doctor could prescribe all the medication in the world. But if you, as the person who is suffering from depression, don't take the steps, it's never going to get better. And that's really what I focused on in the seminars. How can we help you to take control of the depression to help you overcome it.
You hit two really key points there. I mean, you hit a lot of key points, obviously, but to me, it is a family issue. It's not just the issue with the depressed one, because if the family doesn't deal with this, the depressed person, which they become the handicapped member, it can actually cause the whole family to drown with them. It's the family has to know how to deal with it in a very healthy way. And another thing too, there are practical steps that I learned that you can do with depression. There are some very practical things. Sometimes you don't feel like doing it, which is the problem. But there are some very practical things, aerobic exercise. But when you're depressed, you don't want to exercise. Sunlight. But maybe you live in Pittsburgh where there never is a sun. No offense, Steeler fans. But there are things.
Okay.
No, but there are things that can be done, and it is a family disease.
It is.
It is, Nelson. Tell me. So it's a family disease. So
It
explain
is.
that.
And I'm so glad that Pastor Bob talked about family members coming, because
Yeah.
when I see a depressed person with suicidal ideation, I strive to put structure in their life. And the family is key about that. Frequently depressed people switch days and nights. They stay up all night because they can't sleep, and they doze off in the daytime. So there's no structure. So the family can superimpose structure in their life that we're going to have breakfast at this time, everybody's going to be there. Then from 9 o'clock till noon, this is going to happen. It's just like filling out a time card. And those people punch that time card and they do the things supported by the family members that superimpose the structure.
It's interesting because the disease will feed itself. Because
Yes.
I remember when I was depressed, and a lot of people I know, I just wanted to go to bed, close the curtains, turn off the lights, isolate myself, and I just wanted to go to sleep and forget about life, which actually was feeding the depression. I was losing, my structure. So you would do things that would feed the depression, but it was the only thing you felt you could do. You were actually contributing to the problem.
That's right.
One tip that I had that I learned, which really helped me, this is going to sound kind of strange maybe, but I learned that when I was depressed, that I knew my mind was exaggerating things.
Yes.
I knew that the truth was not exactly what my mind was feeling and telling me. So in a way, I said, you know what? I'm depressed. I don't trust my own mind right now. And sometimes I would just pray and said, Lord, just show me the truth. Show me the truth, Lord. Because what my mind was thinking and what I was feeling was so far overblown. So in a way, I learned not to trust my own thoughts when I was depressed. Like, don't make a major decision when you're depressed, for instance. But that helped me. Anyway.
Well, that's huge. And I want to speak again to people who are attending holiday events. Even if the event is in your home and you're the host of the family dinner, don't let the holiday event steal your structure. You make arrangements to leave if you get uptight about what's going on and emotionally drained. Leave. Get in your car and tell them you have a pre-appointment that you must meet and go somewhere for 2 hours.
Yeah. So it's practical, but I think you gave a good idea. Like, plan it ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Have a strategy. Okay, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I came up with some programs, and as I said, Nelson has talked about what you have talked about. People who are depressed, their life is out of control. It's another type of addiction, and unless there's support to help them. The problem is for family members, often they don't know how to do it, and they're emotionally involved.
Right.
And that emotional connection, when a mother sees her son, for example, who's depressed, mom just doesn't say, oh, you're depressed again and moves on, where a counselor may. Counselor may give a depressed person some steps to take, but says, now you're going to have to take them. Once you have that emotional connection, it's much more difficult because they will, oftentimes you will feel their depression and it will affect everybody around them. And eventually the family runs out of the energy to help. So unless the family is really given they need as much training as anybody else, all right, to deal with this. Otherwise they go on emotion and they're going to make mistakes and then they're going to be exhausted trying to help somebody who's depressed.
That's called enabling.
Yes, yes.
And I want to make
exactly.
a comment on that because what can happen with a depressed person? You said the family can become exhausted. What happens is the depressed person can get an inordinate amount of attention where all the focus of the family goes to the depressed person. So the depressed person actually becomes a puppeteer. He's actually controlling or she's controlling the whole family. And then what I've seen in extreme cases is children get neglected. Other family members get neglected because so much attention is going to the quote handicapped person. So you have to stay balanced with this. And you have to teach family, look, you have a serious disease in your family, but you cannot neglect your own personal health and your own goals and what you've got to do because two drowning people cannot help each other.
That's good.
You know, Watchman Nee gave an illustration one time in his classic book, and it was a chapter, and he was describing he was walking along the beach, and a man was drowning in the water, and the guy that was with Watchman Nee was a lifeguard, and the man continued to drown, and the lifeguard didn't do a thing, and the man kept suffering and struggling till he went under. Then the lifeguard went in, swam out to him, and saved his life. And Watchman Nee said to him, he said, you know, I'm glad you saved his life, but it looks like you made him suffer for a while, all right? And you could have helped him and spared him all this hardship. And the lifeguard told him, if I swam out to him while he was still struggling, we both would have died. I needed to wait till he was ready for the help and wouldn't try to resist it. And you're right, sometimes the people who are depressed, they want to control, you know, the people around them to draw them in. And like you said, everybody suffers. And then it just makes the problem worse.
With the whole family, that they'll spend every waking hour, oh, how do we help him? What do we do? Oh my gosh. And they're wringing their hands. They don't know what to do. And so what happens is so much focus goes on the depressed person. And listen, I'm not against depressed people,
Of course.
but so much focus goes on the depressed person. People are not, their prayer life suffers. They may not even fix dinner. Their job suffers. The whole family suffers. So there has to be a balance, you know, and I think this Watchman Nee story, you know, is terrific. It's a serious problem, and we're not going to get into the medical side of it. We cannot obviously recommend medicines stuff on this show, but I do know that with me in my life, I actually did take meds for it. I tried this, a number. I could list them all that I took, and all this sort of stuff. And I actually finally said I don't want to do the meds anymore because what happened to me with the meds was that I just got where I felt nothing. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't happy. I was stuck in neutral. And after a while, I said, this is not life. I don't want to live life in neutral. That's a whole other topic. But it's such a serious issue, and there is help available. I know with me, practical steps, counseling helped me a lot. Finding people who understood the problem, and then prayer and the Holy Spirit coming into my life. But I needed a counselor who understood me, a counselor who got it, not just somebody who would throw me a bunch of facts. I needed somebody who understood what I was going through. That was critical for me.
You know, most of the church people and even some counselors are treating the symptom and not the problem. Many psychiatrists now admit that the antidepressants are not working, especially long term. And so what we have in a compassionate person who's ministering to the depressed person is a person who understands what they're going through and tends to remedy the problem instead of the symptom. That works.
Yeah.
One of the things that I came across, and this can be overwhelming, when I prepared for my seminars, I listed over 140 causes of depression. And I stopped there. I could have gone on. And that can seem overwhelming. But the fact of the matter is, if we really don't find the cause, the seat of depression, then you can't help it.
That's right.
There was a story of a counselor who gave an example one time, what he would do with his people who were suffering from depression. He would tell them to go on the elimination diet. Now, the elimination diet is there to remove foods that we are allergic to that can cause depression. And this man, who was severely depressed, he had eliminated all grains and then started to reintroduce them to see what kind of reactions he would have. And he reintroduced wheat, which is a known allergen, and he had no problems. He reintroduced rye, and again, no problems. He reintroduced corn into his diet, and he said within 20 minutes after eating corn, I wanted to commit suicide.
Wow.
Now his problem was found. This was an issue in his diet. So nutrition is an absolute. I'm glad you brought it up, Nelson, because nutrition is essential to overcoming depression.
Yes,
I would say that so many people are suffering from depression because of poor diet.
That's correct.
So there are many ways that we can help people with practical, simple steps that aren't going to cost them a fortune. And that's where the church can come alongside people, because we can also heal their soul.
Yeah.
Not just their body.
That's good.
But their soul. And you're never going to be healed completely if we just focus on the body and not the spirit and the soul.
That's good.
Well, there's so much to talk about. We cannot get it all in today, but fortunately, there's going to be a part 2. Okay, we'll go more in depth. It's been good. I know we're just touching the surface. If you're listening and you're suffering depression, please stay tuned for part 2, practical steps. Any final comments, Pastor Bob, Nelson?
I think in the part 2, we will discuss a little deeper some aspects of depression, and I hope people are listening because they are really helpful in what is going to be said.
And I just hope that people will, focus on what Christmas is really about this holiday season. We started to talk about that, how it can, if we lose sight of the real message of Christmas, we can get focused on the external, the other issues, the less important. So if you really do battle with depression, at least for this holiday season, what may help is focus on the gift of God through his son, Jesus Christ, that gives us all hope, that makes us all equal, and gives us an eternal promise to look forward to.
Amen.
That is well said, Pastor. As we get ready to close, I want to make an offer to my listeners. As we were doing the show, I have a course on our website. I'm president of International College of Ministry. ICMcollege.org is the website. I have a course called Overcoming Depression, and I have notes that I will offer to anyone for free. They're class notes for 6 weeks of teaching, detailed class notes on overcoming depression. I may also be able to get you a link to listen to that course for free. If you'll email me at drrayself@gmail.com, I will give you the notes. And if you want to, I'll give you access to that course. Dr. Rayself, DRRAYSELF @gmail.com. Said, just tell me what you want. So I heard you on the podcast. I would like the notes to overcoming depression, and I would like to maybe take that course. And I have a way to do that for you for free. Just a gift to you. God bless you. Merry Christmas. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Pastor Bob. Thank you, Nelson. This is Dr. Rayself. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Your review helps the show reach more people and spread the gospel. Please visit my website at icmcollege.org for more information and some really cool free stuff. Be sure and like me on Facebook. Check out my YouTube videos. You can also purchase my latest book, Hear His Voice, Be His Voice, on Amazon.com.